Sometimes fate throws strangers into each other's paths in the most violent ways imaginable. This is the story of Derek, a single father who threw himself in front of a bullet meant for a stranger's child. What happened next left his entire community speechless. The morning after the shooting, a convoy of Hell's Angels rolled up to the local elementary school, and what they did changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crack of the gunshot split the evening air like a lightning strike. Derek didn't have time to think. 1 second, he was walking through the dimly lit parking lot of Miller's Grocery with his 8-year-old daughter, Olivia's hand, tucked safely in his. The next, he saw a man in a dark hoodie raise a pistol toward a little girl standing frozen beside a motorcycle. Time didn't slow down. It shattered. Derek's body moved before his mind caught up. He shoved Olivia hard behind a parked sedan, her small gasp lost in the chaos. Then he lunged forward, arms outstretched, wrapping himself around the terrified child, just as the muzzle flashed orange in the darkness. The bullet tore through his left side, just below his ribs. White-hot pain exploded through his torso. His legs buckled. The little girl screamed, her voice piercing and raw. Derek collapsed onto the asphalt, but his arms stayed locked around her, shielding her body with his own. The shooter cursed, his face twisted with rage and panic. Tires squealed as he bolted toward a waiting car. The engine roared, and the vehicle fishtailed out of the lot, disappearing into the night before anyone could react. Derek's vision blurred. Blood soaked through his shirt, warm and sticky. He heard Olivia crying somewhere nearby, her voice broken and desperate. "Daddy, Daddy, please." "I'm okay, baby," he managed to whisper, though every breath felt like swallowing glass. "Stay down. Stay where you are." Footsteps pounded across the pavement. "Heavy boots." A man's voice, deep and frantic, shouting something Derek couldn't quite make out. Strong hands gripped his shoulders. "Hey! Hey, stay with me, man. Don't you dare close your eyes." Derek blinked up at the figure looming over him, broad-shouldered, covered in tattoos. A leather vest with patches and symbols Derek didn't recognize. The man's face was etched with panic, raw, unfiltered fear. "Zoe!" the man shouted. "Zoe, baby, are you hurt?" The little girl Derek had shielded was sobbing, but unharmed. She stumbled toward the biker, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it looked like he'd never let go. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Derek's breathing grew shallow. His daughter crawled to his side, her small hands clutching his arm. "Daddy, don't leave me," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't leave me." Derek forced a smile, even as darkness crept into the edges of his vision. "Never, sweetheart. I'm right here." The biker knelt beside him, his face inches away. His voice cracked. "You saved my daughter. You took that bullet for her." Derek didn't have the strength to respond. His eyelids grew heavy. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the biker's face, hard, weathered, but streaked with tears, and the words the man whispered, "I owe you everything." Derek woke to the steady beep of machines and the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room. His sides screamed in agony, but the morphine drip dulled it to a manageable throb. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Easy, Daddy, don't move," Olivia's voice. Sweet and terrified, she was sitting in a chair beside his bed, her eyes red and puffy from crying. A nurse stood nearby, adjusting an IV line. "You're awake," the nurse said with a kind smile. "You're very lucky, Mr. Hayes. The bullet missed your vital organs, but you lost a lot of blood. Another inch to the right and—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Derek reached for Olivia's hand. She grabbed it like a lifeline, squeezing so hard her knuckles turned white. "I'm okay, Livy," he whispered. "I promise." She nodded, but her lips trembled. "You scared me so much. I know." "I'm sorry." The door to the room opened, and a police officer stepped inside, notepad in hand. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Officer Ramirez. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened." Derek recounted the events as best as he could. The parking lot, the gunman, the little girl. The officer scribbled notes, his expression grim. "The man who fired the shot is still at large," Ramirez said. "We're working on identifying him, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, I'd advise you to stay vigilant." Derek nodded weakly. Vigilant, as if he had the energy for that. After the officer left, the door creaked open again. This time, the man who entered wasn't in uniform. He was tall, built like a linebacker, with a shaved head and a thick beard streaked with gray. Tattoos covered his arms, skulls, flames, and symbols Derek still didn't understand. The leather vest he wore was unmistakable. Hell's Angels, Derek's heart rate spiked, the monitor beeping faster. Olivia pressed closer to him. The man stopped at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable. Then his jaw tightened, and his voice came out rough like gravel scraping against metal. "Name's Vince," he said. "That little girl you saved?" "That's my daughter Zoe." Derek swallowed hard. "Is she okay?" Vince nodded slowly. "Because of you." His voice cracked and he looked away, blinking hard. "You didn't know her." "Didn't know me. But you stepped in front of a bullet anyway." "I didn't think," Derek admitted. "I just moved." Vince's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Most people wouldn't have. They'd have run, hidden, but you." He shook his head. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the craziest." Derek managed a weak smile. "Probably a little of both." For a long moment, Vince just stood there, staring at the floor. Then he stepped forward and extended a calloused hand. "I don't forget debts," Vince said, his voice steady now. "And I don't forget people who protect my blood. You need anything at all, you call me." Derek hesitated, then shook the man's hand. Vince's grip was firm, almost crushing. "Thank you," Derek whispered. Vince nodded once, then turned and walked out of the room, his boots echoing down the hospital corridor. Olivia looked up at her father, her eyes wide. "Daddy, who was that?" Derek exhaled slowly, his side still throbbing. "Someone who's going to make sure we're safe, sweetheart." But as he lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. Outside, in the hospital parking lot, Vince climbed onto his Harley. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "It's me," he said when the line connected. "We've got a situation. The guy who saved Zoe, he's a target now, and I'm not letting anything happen to him." There was a pause, then a gruff voice on the other end. "What do you need?" Vince's jaw tightened. "Call the brothers. All of them. We ride tomorrow." He ended the call, started his engine, and roared off into the night. The storm was coming, and Derek Hayes had no idea what he'd just set in motion. News travels fast in a small town, especially when it involves gunfire and bikers. By the time Derek was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, the entire community of Riverside knew what had happened. The local news had run the story. Twice, single father takes bullet for stranger's child, and social media exploded with opinions. Some called Derek a hero, others whispered warnings. "Those Hell's Angels," Mrs. Patterson from down the street muttered to her husband as Derek limped past their house, his side wrapped in bandages. "They're trouble. Always have been. Now they're circling this neighborhood like vultures." Derek ignored the stares and whispers. All he cared about was getting Olivia home safely and returning to some semblance of normal life. But normal felt like a distant memory now. That first night back, Derek sat on his worn couch, a bag of frozen peas pressed against his wound. Olivia curled up beside him, refusing to leave his side for more than a few minutes at a time. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice small, "what if the bad man comes back?" Derek's chest tightened. He'd been asking himself the same question. The police had no leads. The shooter was still out there. And according to Officer Ramirez, the shooting wasn't random. It was targeted. Someone wanted Vince's daughter dead, which meant Derek had made himself a target too. "We're going to be okay," Derek said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I promise," but promises felt fragile these days. Around midnight, Derek heard it, a low, distant rumble that grew steadily louder. His stomach dropped. He moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. Motorcycles, a dozen of them, maybe more, rolling slowly down his quiet street. Chrome gleamed under the streetlights. Leather vests. Hell's Angels patches. Olivia scrambled off the couch. "Daddy! What's happening?" "Stay inside," Derek said quickly. He grabbed his phone, ready to dial 911, but then the bike stopped, right in front of his house. Vince dismounted first, followed by a line of men and women who looked like they'd walked straight out of a nightmare, or a guardian army, depending on how you looked at it. Derek's heart hammered in his chest. He opened the front door slowly, stepping onto the porch despite the pain shooting through his side. "Vince," he called out, his voice unsteady. Vince walked forward, his expression serious. Behind him, the other bikers stood in formation, silent and imposing. "We need to talk," Vince said. Derek glanced back at Olivia, who was peeking through the window, her eyes wide with fear. He stepped down onto the driveway, wincing with each movement. "What's going on?" Derek asked. Vince crossed his arms. "The guy who shot you? He wasn't some random thug. He's connected to a crew we've had problems with for years. They wanted to hurt me by going after Zoe." His jaw tightened. "And now that you stepped in, you're on their radar too." Derek's blood ran cold. "You're saying they'll come after me? After Olivia?" "Not if we have anything to say about it." One of the bikers, a woman with short-cropped hair and a scar across her cheek, stepped forward. "Name's Raven," she said. "Vince told us what you did. You're one of us now, whether you like it or not." Derek blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Vince stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "You saved my daughter's life. In our world, that means something. It means you're family, and we protect our family." "I'm not a biker," Derek said, shaking his head. "I'm just a guy trying to raise his kid." "Exactly," Vince said, "which is why you need us. Because right now, you and Olivia are exposed, and I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you." Derek looked at the line of bikers behind Vince. Their faces were hard, weathered by years of riding and fighting, but there was something else there too. Loyalty. Respect. "What does this mean?" Derek asked quietly. Vince glanced back at his crew, then met Derek's eyes. "It means we watch your house. We make sure Olivia gets to school safe. We make sure nobody even thinks about coming near you." Derek's throat tightened. He wanted to refuse, to insist he could handle this on his own. But the truth was, he couldn't. Not against the kind of people Vince was describing. "Okay," Derek said finally, "but I don't want Olivia scared. She's been through enough." Vince nodded. "She won't be. I'll make sure Zoe meets her. Kids have a way of understanding things better than adults." Derek looked back at his house, at the small shadow in the window. Olivia was watching, her face pressed against the glass. "Thank you," Derek whispered. Vince clapped a heavy hand on Derek's shoulder, carefully avoiding his injured side. "You don't thank family. You just show up when they need you, like you did for Zoe." The bikers mounted their motorcycles, engines roaring to life one by one, but instead of leaving they spread out, parking at intervals along the street. A perimeter, a wall. Derek stood on his driveway, watching in disbelief as the Hell's Angels became his unlikely guardians. Inside, Olivia ran to the door as Derek stepped back in. "Daddy, are those the scary people everyone talks about?" Derek knelt down, ignoring the sharp pain in his side, and looked his daughter in the eyes. "They're not scary, Livy. They're friends, and they're going to make sure we're safe." Olivia frowned, processing this. "The man with the beard, he's Zoe's daddy, right?" "That's right. Is Zoe scared too?" Derek paused. "Yeah, baby, I think she is." Olivia nodded slowly. "Then maybe we can be scared together." Derek pulled her into a gentle hug, his heart aching. "You're braver than you know, Livy." That night, Derek lay awake in bed, listening to the distant rumble of motorcycles patrolling the neighborhood. It should have felt intrusive, threatening, But instead, it felt like a lullaby. For the first time since the shooting, Derek allowed himself to close his eyes without fear. Outside, Vince sat on his bike, a cigarette glowing in the darkness. He thought about Derek, a man who barely knew how to throw a punch, stepping in front of a bullet without hesitation. Most people talked about loyalty. Derek had lived it, and now Vince would return the favor, no matter what it took. One of his brothers, a grizzled veteran named Axe, pulled up beside him. "You really think this guy's worth all this?" Vince didn't hesitate. "He took a bullet for my kid, Axe. He's worth everything." Axe nodded, flicking ash from his cigarette. "Then we ride, for as long as it takes." Vince started his engine, the Harley growling beneath him. "For as long as it takes." The convoy rolled. Through the night, a shield of steel and leather wrapped around a single father and his daughter. And somewhere out there, in the shadows, the enemy was watching. But now they had a problem, because the Hells Angels didn't forgive, and they never forgot. Morning came too quickly. Derek barely slept, his body still adjusting to the pain and the strange new reality of having a biker gang as his personal security detail. Olivia shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, are they still out there?" Derek glanced out the window. Sure enough, 2 motorcycles were parked across the street, their riders leaning casually against the bikes, coffee cups in hand. "Yeah, sweetheart, they are." Olivia pressed her face to the window. "Can I go say hi?" "Not right now. Get dressed for school. We need to leave in 20 minutes. She groaned but complied, dragging her backpack down the hallway. Derek poured himself coffee, his hands still shaky from the adrenaline that hadn't quite left his system. His phone buzzed. "A text from Vince. We'll follow you to the school. Don't worry about anything." Derek stared at the message. Part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain some independence. But the rational part, the part that remembered the bullet tearing through his side, knew better. 20 minutes later, Derek and Olivia climbed into his old pickup truck. As he pulled out of the driveway, the 2 motorcycles roared to life behind him. Olivia twisted in her seat, watching through the rear window. "They're following us." "I know. Why?" "Because they want to make sure we're safe." She turned back around, her small face scrunched in thought. "Are we in danger?" Derek's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He hated lying to her, but he also didn't want to terrify her. "Not anymore. Not with them around." The drive to Riverside Elementary took 10 minutes. Derek pulled into the drop-off lane, expecting the bikes to peel off and disappear. Instead, they followed him right up to the curb. Parents turned and stared. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Derek's stomach sank. This was exactly what he'd hoped to avoid. A scene, but then the rumble grew louder. Much louder. From around the corner, a convoy of motorcycles appeared. 10, 15, 20 bikes, all bearing the Hells Angels colors. They rolled into the school parking lot in formation, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. The entire drop-off lane went silent. Parents grabbed their children. Teachers stepped forward, uncertain whether to intervene or call the police. Derek climbed out of his truck, his heart pounding. "Vince, what are you doing?" Vince dismounted, pulling off his helmet. Behind him, Zoe hopped off the back of his bike, wearing a tiny leather jacket and a bright pink backpack that clashed hilariously with the biker aesthetic. "What does it look like?" Vince said. "We're bringing our girls to school." Olivia climbed out slowly, her eyes wide as saucers. Zoe ran up to her, grinning. "Hi, you're Olivia, right?" "My dad told me your dad saved me." Olivia nodded shyly. "Yeah, he did." "That's so cool." Zoe grabbed her hand. "Want to walk in together?" Before Derek could respond, the 2 girls were already heading toward the school entrance, hand in hand, chattering like old friends. Derek stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The other bikers dismounted, forming a protective line along the sidewalk. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They just stood there, a wall of leather and steel. One of the teachers, Mrs. Brennan, approached cautiously. "Excuse me, but this is a school zone. You can't—" "We're not here to cause trouble," Vince said calmly. We're just making sure our kids get inside safe. Mrs. Brennan looked from Vince to Derek, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. Mr. Hayes, is everything all right? Derek nodded. Yeah, everything's fine. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. Instead, she hurried after Olivia and Zoe, ushering them through the front doors. As the children disappeared inside, the tension in the parking lot began to ease, slightly. Parents still whispered, phones out, recording videos that would no doubt be all over social media within the hour. Vince turned to Derek. You good? Derek exhaled slowly. You didn't have to do all this. Yeah, Vince said. I did. He glanced at his crew. We all did. One of the bikers, a younger guy with a scar running down his neck, stepped forward. Name's Bones, he said. Your kid's safe now. They all are. Nobody's going to touch him. Derek didn't know what to say. These men, these people the world feared and judged, were putting themselves on the line for him and Olivia. Thank you, Derek managed. Vince clapped him on the shoulder. Like I said, you're family now, and family doesn't ask for permission to protect each other. The bikers began mounting their motorcycles, engines roaring one by one. But before they left, Vince leaned in close. The shooter's name is Cade Mullins, he said quietly. We've got people looking for him. When we find him, this ends. Derek's blood ran cold. What are you going to do? Vince's expression darkened. Whatever it takes to keep our kids safe. Before Derek could respond, Vince was gone. His bike roaring out of the parking lot, followed by the rest of the convoy. Derek stood alone in the drop-off lane, the sound of engines fading into the distance. Around him, parents stared, their faces a mix of fear, awe, and judgment. He didn't care. For the first time in days, Olivia had walked into school without fear. She'd smiled, she'd made a friend, and that was worth every judgmental glare in the world. Inside the school, Olivia sat beside Zoe in Mrs. Brennan's third-grade classroom. The other kids whispered and pointed, but Olivia barely noticed. Your dad's really brave, Zoe said, pulling out her crayons. Olivia smiled. So is yours, Zoe grinned. Yeah, he's the bravest. The two girls bent over their drawings, coloring side by side, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Back at home, Derek collapsed onto his couch, exhaustion washing over him. His phone buzzed non-stop, texts from neighbors, co-workers, even his ex-wife's sister asking if he'd lost his mind. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened a text from Vince. Your girl made it to class. We're keeping watch. Get some rest. Derek closed his eyes, the weight of the past few days finally catching up with him. He thought about the bullet, the hospital, the bikers who'd become his unlikely protectors, and for the first time since Sarah died. Derek didn't feel alone. Across town, in a dingy motel room, Cade Mullins sat on the edge of a sagging bed cleaning his gun. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You messed up. Now the angels are hunting you. Cade smirked, chambering around. Let them come. But deep down, beneath the bravado, a knot of fear twisted in his gut. Because everyone knew the Hell's Angels didn't stop. They didn't forgive, and they always found their target. The war had begun, and Derek Hayes, a single father who just wanted to protect his daughter, was caught right in the middle. The days that followed felt surreal. Derek returned to work at the auto repair shop, though his boss gave him lighter duties because of his injury. Every morning, the routine was the same. Wake up, get Olivia ready, drive to school with a motorcycle escort, then head to work while bikers patrolled his neighborhood. The town couldn't stop talking about it. Social media exploded with opinions. Some praised the Hell's Angels for protecting an innocent family. Others condemned them, calling it a publicity stunt or worse, intimidation tactics. Derek tried to ignore it all. But ignoring became impossible when the threat started. It began with a note shoved under his door. Crude handwriting on crumpled paper. You should have minded your own business. Then his truck's tires were slashed while he was at work. The next day, someone spray-painted a crude message on his garage door. Dead man walking. Derek called the police. Officer Ramirez came by, took photos, filed a report. But his expression said it all. This was escalating and the police were stretched thin. We're doing everything we can, Ramirez said, though his tone lacked conviction. But Mr. Hayes, you need to be careful. These people don't mess around, Derek nodded numbly. After the officer left, he sat on his porch steps, head in his hands. His side still ached. His daughter was terrified. And now his home, their sanctuary, felt violated. The rumble of a motorcycle broke through his thoughts. Vince pulled up, killing the engine. Heard about the tires, Vince said, dismounting. And the paint, Derek looked up. Word travels fast. It does when you're family. Vince sat down beside him, the steps creaking under his weight. This Cade guy, he's trying to scare you. Make you back off. Back off from what? Derek said bitterly. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to protect a kid. I know. And that's exactly why you're a target now. Because you stood up when most people would have run. Vince pulled out a cigarette, then thought better of it and put it away. Look, I've got people working on finding Cade. But until we do, we need to step things up. Derek frowned. What does that mean? It means we don't just patrol anymore. It means one of us stays here full-time. And it means we need to have a conversation about what happens if Cade makes a move. Derek's stomach twisted. I'm not getting involved in some gang war. You already are, Vince said bluntly. The second you threw yourself in front of that bullet, you became part of this. Now we can either sit around waiting for Cade to strike, or we can be proactive. I have a daughter, Derek said, his voice cracking. I won't put her in more danger. Vince's expression softened. Neither will I. That's why we're doing this. Zoe and Olivia, they're friends now. They're innocent. And I'll be damned if I let some coward hurt either of them. Derek stared at the spray-painted garage door, anger simmering beneath his fear. He'd spent years trying to give Olivia a quiet, stable life. Now that life was in ruins, what do you need from me? Derek asked quietly. Trust, Vince said. Trust that we've got your back. And if things go south, trust that we'll handle it. Derek met his eyes. There was something in Vince's gaze, a fierce protectiveness that reminded Derek of himself. Two fathers from completely different worlds, bound by the same desperate love for their children. Okay, Derek said. I trust you, Vince nodded. Good, because starting tonight, Bones is staying in your driveway. He'll rotate shifts with Raven. Nobody gets near this house without us knowing. That night, true to his word, Bones parked his bike in Derek's driveway and set up a folding chair on the porch. He was younger than most of the crew, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that never stopped scanning the street. Olivia peeked through the window. Daddy, why's that man sitting outside? Derek knelt beside her. He's keeping us safe, sweetheart. Like a guard, like a superhero. Derek smiled faintly. Yeah, like a superhero. Olivia seemed satisfied with that answer. She went to bed without protest, clutching her stuffed rabbit, but Derek couldn't sleep. He lay awake, listening to the sounds of the night. Crickets, distant traffic, the occasional creak of bones shifting in his chair. Around 2 a.m, Derek heard voices outside. Low, tense, he crept to the window. Bones was standing now, facing a shadowy figure at the edge of the property. Derek's heart raced. He grabbed his phone, ready to dial 911, but then Bones spoke, his voice calm but commanding. Walk away, right now, or you're not walking anywhere. The figure hesitated, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. Bones returned to his chair as if nothing had happened. Derek exhaled, his hands shaking. The Hell's Angels weren't just watching. They were actively keeping danger at bay. The next morning, Vince showed up with Zoe. The two girls ran off to play in the backyard, while Derek and Vince sat at the kitchen table. Bones told me someone tried to scope out your house last night, Vince said. Derek nodded. I saw. Who was it? Probably one of Cade's guys. Testing the waters. Vince's jaw tightened. But they got the message. We're not going anywhere. Derek poured coffee, his hands steadier now. I keep thinking about what you said. About being proactive, yeah? What does that look like? Vince studied him carefully. It means we find Cade before he finds you. We've got connections, people who owe us favors, people who see things the cops don't. We're already closing in. Derek's stomach churned. And when you find him? Vince didn't flinch. We make sure he never comes near you or our kids again." The weight of those words hung in the air. Derek knew what Vince was implying, but he also knew that the police hadn't been able to stop the threats. The law had limits, the Hell's Angels didn't. "I don't want to know the details," Derek said quietly. "But I need to know my daughter will be safe." "She will be," Vince promised. "On my life, Derek, she will be." Outside, Olivia and Zoe's laughter echoed through the yard. Two little girls playing without fear, unaware of the storm gathering around them. Derek watched them through the window, his heart aching. He'd taken a bullet to protect a stranger's child. Now that stranger had become his closest ally, and together they would face whatever came next. Because family, real family, didn't run when things got hard. They stood their ground, no matter the cost. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 3 weeks after the shooting, something unexpected arrived at Derek's door. It was a Saturday morning. Olivia was watching cartoons in the living room while Derek made pancakes. A knock interrupted the domestic calm. Derek opened the door to find Vince standing there, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "Got a minute?" Vince asked. "Always." "Come in." Vince stepped inside, nodding to Olivia, who waved shyly before returning to her show. The two men sat at the kitchen table. Vince slid the package across. "Open it." Derek unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather vest, not full colors like the Hell's Angels wore, but something simpler. Black leather, well-worn but sturdy. And on the back, hand-stitched in bold lettering, "Protected." Below it a smaller patch, "Riverside Family." Derek's throat tightened. "Vince, I can't—" "You can," Vince interrupted. "And you will. This isn't about making you a member. It's about making a statement. You're under our protection. Anyone who sees this vest knows you're off limits." Derek ran his fingers over the stitching. The craftsmanship was meticulous, clearly done with care. "Who made this?" "Raven," Vince said. "She's good with her hands." "Wanted to do something for you." Derek looked up. "Why are you all doing this?" "I'm just—" "Stop," Vince said firmly. "You're not just anything. You took a bullet for my daughter. You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask questions. You just acted." His voice softened. "In our world, that kind of loyalty is everything." "It's rarer than you think," Derek swallowed hard. "I don't know how to be part of this world." "You don't have to be," Vince said. "You just have to accept that you're not alone anymore. That vest, it's a symbol. It says you've got brothers and sisters who'll ride through hell for you." Derek stared at the vest, emotions churning. He'd been alone for so long. Since Sarah died, it had been just him and Olivia against the world. The weight of isolation had become so familiar, he'd forgotten what support felt like. "Thank you," Derek whispered. Vince stood, clapping him on the shoulder. "We're having a gathering tonight. Nothing crazy, just the crew, some food, some music. Bring Olivia. Let her see that we're not just scary bikers. We're people, family." Derek hesitated. "I don't want her exposed to—" "There won't be anything she shouldn't see," Vince assured him. "Half the crew is bringing their kids." "Zoe's been asking about Olivia non-stop." Derek glanced at his daughter, still engrossed in her cartoons. She'd been smiling more lately, sleeping better. Maybe this was what she needed, to see that the people protecting them were human, not just intimidating figures on motorcycles. "Okay," Derek said. "We'll be there." That evening, Derek pulled up to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was old, industrial, but lights blazed inside and music drifted out into the night. Motorcycles lined the parking lot, dozens of them, gleaming under the floodlights. Olivia pressed her face to the window. "Are there really going to be other kids here?" "That's what Vince said." They walked inside together, Derek wearing the vest Vince had given him. It felt strange, heavy but comforting, like armor. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. String lights hung from the rafters. Tables were loaded with food, burgers, ribs, corn on the cob. A band played classic rock in one corner while people talked, laughed, and drank. But what struck Derek most were the children. Kids of all ages ran around playing tag, laughing. A makeshift playground had been set up in one corner with slides and swings. Zoe spotted them immediately and came running. "Olivia, come on, I'll show you the trampoline." Olivia looked up at Derek, uncertain. "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right here." She smiled and ran off with Zoe, her nervousness melting away. Vince appeared at Derek's side, beer in hand. "See, not so scary." Derek shook his head in amazement. "This is not what I expected. Most people don't," Vince said. "They see the vests and the bikes and assume we're monsters. But we're just people trying to protect what's ours." Raven approached, her short hair pulled back, a genuine smile on her face. "The vest fits well," she said. "It's perfect," Derek said. "Thank you, really." She nodded, then glanced at the kids playing. "Your girl's got spirit. She'll fit right in." Throughout the evening, Derek met more of the crew. Axe, the grizzled veteran who told stories about cross-country rides. Tiny, a mountain of a man with a surprisingly gentle voice, who ran a mechanic shop. Maria, a nurse who rode on weekends and patched up the crew when they got hurt. They weren't what Derek expected. They were teachers, mechanics, veterans, parents, people with jobs and families and fears, just like him. As the night went on, Vince called for everyone's attention. The music died down and the crew gathered around. "Most of you know what happened a few weeks ago," Vince began. "This man, Derek Hayes, took a bullet meant for my daughter. He didn't know me, didn't know Zoe, but he threw himself into the line of fire anyway," the crowd murmured, nodding. "In our world, that kind of courage deserves recognition. So tonight we're making it official." Vince gestured to Derek. "Come up here." Derek's heart pounded as he stepped forward. Olivia watched from the side, her eyes wide. Vince placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "Derek Hayes, you're not a biker. You're not a member of this club. But you are family. And that means something deeper than any patch or title." The crew erupted in cheers, raising their beers and fists in salute. Vince pulled Derek into a brief, firm hug. "Welcome to the Brotherhood, brother." Derek's eyes stung. He looked out at the faces surrounding him, people who'd been strangers weeks ago, now standing as his protectors, his allies, his family. "Thank you," he managed, "for everything." The party continued late into the night. Derek watched Olivia play with the other children, her laughter genuine and free. For the first time since the shooting, she looked like a kid again, unburdened, safe, happy. As they drove home that night, Olivia was half asleep in the passenger seat. "Daddy?" she mumbled. "Yes, sweetheart. Those people aren't scary at all." "They're nice," Derek smiled, his chest tight with emotion. "Yeah, baby. They are. Are we really part of their family now?" Derek glanced at the vest hanging in the back seat, the word "protected" stitched across it. "Yeah," he said softly. "We really are." And for the first time in years, Derek believed it. He wasn't alone anymore. Neither was Olivia. They had a family. An unconventional, leather-clad, motorcycle-riding family, but family nonetheless. Back at the warehouse, Vince stood outside, smoking a cigarette. Axe joined him, leaning against the wall. "You really think this guy's worth all the trouble?" Axe asked. Vince didn't hesitate. "He took a bullet for Zoe. He's worth everything." Axe nodded slowly. "Then we make sure Cade never gets near him." "Damn right we do." The two men stood in silence, the weight of their vow hanging heavy in the night air. Somewhere out there, Cade Mullins was still a threat. But now he wasn't just facing one man. He was facing an entire brotherhood, and they were coming for him. The calm didn't last long. 4 days after the gathering, Derek was closing up the repair shop when his phone rang. Vince's name flashed on the screen. "We found him," Vince said without preamble. "Cade, we know where he's hiding." Derek's blood turned to ice. "Where?" "Old motel on Highway 9, the Sunset Inn. He's been laying low, but one of our contacts spotted him." Vince's voice was hard, cold. "We're moving tonight. What are you going to do?" "What needs to be done?" Derek's mind raced. Part of him wanted to tell Vince to call the police, to handle this legally. But another part, the part that remembered the bullet, the threats, the fear in Olivia's eyes, wanted Cade to face justice. "Real justice. Don't do anything you can't come back from," Derek said quietly. "I'm not worried about coming back," Vince replied. "I'm worried about making sure you and the girls can sleep at night without looking over your shoulders." The line went dead. Derek stood in the empty garage, wrench still in hand, heart hammering. He thought about calling the police, warning them. But what would he say? That a biker gang was planning to confront a shooter? They'd never get there in time. And even if they did, Cade would lawyer up, maybe walk on a technicality. No, this was happening. And all Derek could do was wait. At the Sunset Inn, Cade Mullins sat on the edge of a sagging bed, counting cash. He'd been lying low for weeks, moving from motel to motel, staying off the grid. The job had gone sideways. He was supposed to scare Vince's crew, send a message. Instead, some nobody civilian had jumped in front of the bullet. Now the angels were hunting him. He could feel it, the way prey feels the predator circling. But Cade wasn't going down without a fight. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're out of time." Cade's jaw tightened. He grabbed his gun from the nightstand, checked the clip. "Fully loaded. Come on then," he muttered. "Let's finish this." Outside, the rumble of motorcycles grew louder. A dozen bikes pulled into the motel parking lot, headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Cade peered through the blinds, his pulse spiking. They'd found him. Vince dismounted first, followed by Axe, Bones, Raven, and 8 others. They moved with precision, spreading out, surrounding the building. This wasn't a random confrontation. This was tactical. Vince approached the door of room 12 and knocked. 3 sharp raps. "Cade, we need to talk." Inside, Cade's hands shook. He aimed the gun at the door. "Get lost or I'll drop the first one through that door." Vince's voice remained calm. "You shot at my daughter. You threatened an innocent man and his kid. You think you're walking away from this?" "I wasn't aiming at your kid," Cade shouted back. "I was trying to scare you." "By shooting near a child?" Vince's voice turned to steel. "You crossed a line, Cade, and now there's a price." Cade's mind raced. He could try to shoot his way out, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He could barricade himself inside, but they'd just wait him out. Or he could surrender. But surrendering to the Hell's Angels wasn't the same as surrendering to the cops. These men didn't care about trials or lawyers. "I've got a gun," Cade yelled. "I'll use it." "So do we," Axe called out. "Difference is we don't miss." Silence stretched. Then Vince spoke again, his tone shifting slightly. "Cade, you've got one chance. You come out, you face what you did, and maybe you walk away from this alive. But if you make us come in there, I can't promise you'll leave breathing." Cade swallowed hard. Sweat dripped down his face. His finger hovered over the trigger, then slowly he lowered the gun. The door creaked open. Cade stepped out, hands raised, the pistol dangling from one finger. "Don't shoot. I'm coming out." Vince moved forward, snatching the gun and tossing it to Raven. Then, in one swift motion, he grabbed Cade by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You wanted to scare people?" Vince hissed, his face inches from Cade's. "Congratulations. You succeeded. But now you're going to learn what real fear feels like." Cade's bravado crumbled. I didn't mean to." "Shut up." Vince tightened his grip. "You shot near children. You threatened a man who saved my daughter's life. You made a war you can't win." Axe stepped forward. "What do we do with him, Vince?" For a long moment, Vince stared into Cade's terrified eyes. Part of him wanted to finish this the old way. No cops, no courts, just justice delivered in the dark. But then he thought of Zoe, of Olivia, of Derek, who'd risked everything not out of violence but out of love. "We do this right," Vince said finally. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Yeah, I need police at the Sunset Inn, on Highway 9. We've got the shooter from the grocery store parking lot incident. He's armed, but we've disarmed him." "Get here quick," Cade blinked in shock. "You're turning me in?" "I'm making sure you pay," Vince said. "But not like this. You're going to sit in a cell, face a judge, and spend the next decade thinking about what you did." Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. The bikers held Cade against the wall until police cars flooded the parking lot, lights flashing red and blue. Officer Ramirez stepped out, his expression a mix of surprise and caution. "Vince, what's going on here?" "This is Cade Mullins," Vince said. "The shooter you've been looking for. He just confessed to me. You'll find his gun in my associate's hand. Fully loaded, Recently fired. Ramirez looked from Vince to Cade, who was trembling now, all fight drained from him. "Cuff him," Ramirez ordered his partner. As they secured Cade, Ramirez turned back to Vince. "You could have handled this differently." "Yeah," Vince said. "But I didn't, because that's not who we are." Ramirez studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Get out of here. Before I have to ask too many questions." The bikers mounted their motorcycles and disappeared into the night, leaving the police to process the scene. An hour later, Derek's phone rang. Vince's voice was calm, almost relaxed. "It's over. Cade's in custody." "You're safe," Derek exhaled, relief flooding through him. "You didn't—" "No," Vince interrupted. "We did it the right way. For you, for the girls, for everyone." Derek sat down heavily on his couch, emotions overwhelming him. "Thank you, Vince, for everything. That's what family does, brother." Derek hung up and went to Olivia's room. She was fast asleep, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his heart full. For the first time in weeks, Derek felt the weight lift from his chest. The threat was gone. His daughter was safe. And he had a family, unexpected, unconventional, but real, standing behind him. Outside, a single motorcycle rolled past his house. Bones, on patrol as always, gave a two-finger salute as he passed. Derek smiled. He was no longer alone, and he never would be again. 6 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. Derek still worked at the repair shop, his wound now just a faint scar he sometimes touched absent-mindedly. Olivia thrived in school, her friendship with Zoe growing stronger every day. The two girls were inseparable, playdates, sleepovers, birthday parties, and the Hells Angels. They remained a constant protective presence in Derek's life. Cade Mullins was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder, weapons charges, and a list of other crimes the police uncovered during their investigation. The trial had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. Derek testified, recounting the night he took the bullet. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Justice, it turned out, could be served. On a crisp Saturday morning, Derek stood in his driveway wearing the vest Raven had made for him. It had become a part of his identity now, a symbol of everything he'd been through and everyone who stood beside him. Vince pulled up on his Harley, Zoe riding on the back. She hopped off and ran to find Olivia, who was already waiting by the door. "Ready for today?" Vince asked, dismounting. Derek nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be. Today was special." The Hells Angels were organizing a charity ride, a fundraiser for families affected by gun violence. It was Vince's idea, inspired by everything that had happened. And Derek had been asked to speak at the opening ceremony. The ride would start at Riverside Elementary, pass through town, and end at the community center, where survivors and families could share their stories, receive support, and connect with resources. "You nervous?" Vince asked. "Terrified," Derek admitted. "Public speaking isn't exactly my thing." "You took a bullet in front of dozens of people," Vince said with a smirk. "I think you can handle a microphone." Derek laughed despite himself. "Fair point." An hour later, the school parking lot was transformed. Hundreds of motorcycles lined the streets, not just Hells Angels, but riders from clubs across the state who'd heard about the cause and wanted to support it. Families gathered, children waved flags, and local news crews set up cameras. At the center of it all stood a small stage. Derek climbed the steps, his legs shaky. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of faces turning toward him. He gripped the microphone, his voice wavering at first. 6 months ago, I was just a guy trying to get through life. A single dad doing his best to raise his daughter. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't brave. I was just... There, he paused, gathering his thoughts. And then, in one moment, everything changed. I saw a gun. I saw a child in danger. And I moved. I didn't think about it. I just acted. The crowd listened, rapt. That bullet could have killed me. And for a while I was angry. Angry that I'd been put in that position. Angry that my daughter had to watch. Angry that our quiet life had been shattered. Derek's voice grew stronger. But then something unexpected happened. The father of the girl I saved, a man I'd been taught to fear, became my protector. His crew, people society labels as dangerous, became my family. He gestured to Vince and the Hells Angels standing at the edge of the crowd. These men and women taught me something. Family isn't just blood. It's loyalty. It's showing up when things get hard. It's standing beside someone even when the world tells you to walk away. His voice cracked with emotion. Today, we ride not just for me, but for every family touched by violence. For every parent who's afraid. For every child who deserves to feel safe. We ride because we refuse to let fear win. The crowd erupted in applause. Motorcycles revved their engines in unison, a deafening roar of support. Derek stepped down from the stage, his heart pounding. Vince met him at the bottom, pulling him into a brief hug. "Damn, brother. You nailed it," Derek laughed, wiping his eyes. "I almost threw up halfway through." Nobody could tell. The ride began, a massive convoy of chrome and leather rolling through Riverside. People lined the streets, waving and cheering. Children held signs, "Thank you, bikers," and "Heroes wear leather." Derek rode beside Vince, Olivia and Zoe safely tucked in the escort vehicle behind them. The wind whipped past, the rumble of engines a comforting thunder. For the first time since the shooting, Derek felt whole. At the community center, the event continued with food, music, and speeches from other survivors. Derek watched as Olivia and Zoe played with the other children, their laughter rising above the noise. Raven approached, a rare smile on her scarred face. "You did good today, Derek, really good." "Thanks. And thank you for everything. The vest, the protection, the friendship," she shrugged. "That's what family does." As the sun set, casting golden light across the parking lot, Derek found himself standing with Vince, watching the crowd. "You ever think about how strange this all is?" Derek asked. 6 months ago we were strangers, now we're brothers," Vince finished. "Yeah, I think about it. Life's funny that way. Sometimes it throws you into hell, and sometimes it gives you a family to pull you out." Derek nodded. "I don't know what I would have done without you guys, honestly." "You would have survived," Vince said, "because that's who you are. But you don't have to survive alone anymore." They stood in comfortable silence, the sounds of celebration filling the air. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the motorcycles had rumbled away, Derek tucked Olivia into bed. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, today was the best day ever." "Yeah?" "Yeah, everyone was so happy. And Zoe said we're sisters now. Not real sisters, but heart sisters." Derek's throat tightened. "That's a beautiful thing to be, sweetheart. Do you think Mommy would be proud of us?" The question hit Derek like a punch to the chest. He thought of Sarah, of the life they'd planned, of the years she'd missed. "I think," Derek said slowly, "she'd be incredibly proud. Of both of us." Olivia smiled and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Derek walked to his living room, where the vest hung on a chair. He ran his fingers over the protected patch, remembering everything, the gunshot, the hospital, the threats, the brotherhood that had risen around him. His phone buzzed. A text from Vince. "Sleep well, brother. We've got your back, always." Derek smiled and typed back, "I know. Thank you." He looked around his small house, no longer just a place to survive, but a home filled with love, safety, and the knowledge that he was never alone. Outside, the distant rumble of a motorcycle echoed through the night. Bones, still keeping watch, still protecting. Derek poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window, staring out at the quiet street. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, isolated, struggling, carrying the weight of the world alone, and the man he was now, scarred but stronger, surrounded by an unlikely family, bound not by blood, but by something deeper, sacrifice, loyalty, love. In a world that had tried to break him, Derek had found something unbreakable. He'd found family, not the family he expected, not the family the world would understand, but the family he needed. And as he stood there, the vest hanging behind him like a badge of honor, Derek realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they ride Harleys. Sometimes they're single dads who act on instinct when a child needs saving. And sometimes The people the world fears the most are the ones who'll stand beside you when everyone else walks away. Derek raised his glass to the window. To the night, to the brothers and sisters who'd claimed him as their own. To family, he whispered, and somewhere out there, engines rumbled in agreement. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.